Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. So I just got finished watching the crushingly long 2-hour English Liberal Party leadership debate, and my goodness, this thing was very on brand for the Liberals these days. It was both awful and extremely dull. We had four candidates there: Frank Baylis, Mark Carney, Karina Gould, and Chrystia Freeland, and they pretty much all did bad from a conservative's perspective, like myself. But when even considering what a liberal would think about this debate, I don't think many of the candidates did themselves much good, especially the two who are recognized as the real frontrunners, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland to a lesser extent. To put it in a nutshell, for those of you who don't want to watch a full debate breakdown, I would say the best two performing candidates were Frank Baylis and Karina Gould, but they're not going to win, so they're really only increasing their support to potentially pass it either to Carney or Freeland. And this very much is still a leadership race close enough that Freeland could win. And Mark Carney has definitely only been shooting himself in the foot with these performances because you don't understand the hype he has on social media and in the legacy media when you watch him performing on stage. He's just an accountant, effectively, just some random accountant walked on stage and gave generic liberal coded answers for every question he was asked. Anyways, well, let's take this thing from top to bottom. I'm not going to show too many clips because I don't want any of you to fall asleep while you're driving, but I will be kind of going over what the arc of the debate was. But before I get to that, guys, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment because it really helps me in the algorithm. I've had some people complain, Wyatt, stop telling people to like the video and subscribe. Like, if I don't tell people to subscribe, you'd be shocked how few people will subscribe, even on a video that gets like 50,000 views. A lot of people are in the zone, they're doing their own thing. So mentioning it does help me get to my goal of 100,000 by December. Anyways, okay. Let's just start off with a clip of Mark Carney. I'll be doing letter grades. I'll roll them out a little bit later in the video when I've given you a little bit of evidence for why I would kind of give each person the grade I'm going to give them. But let's just start off with a clip of Mark Carney. This is a clip his own campaign uploaded, so they think this was a good moment. This was in response to a question about how he would be different from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
I'm different in the following respects. First, focus on the economy. Laser focus on the economy, and that means good jobs, people's wages growing faster than inflation. It means getting prices down. It means building homes. It means building a future for this country. Secondly, I'm much more...
I know, and I apologize ahead of time, guys. I am subjecting you to this, but this is basically his entire performance in one clip. He lists a lot of things. He sounds pretend detailed. He is pretend competent.
Hands-on. Much more of a hands-on person, hands-on manager. I focus on results and getting things done. Thirdly, and I've heard this, I'm fortunate to have support in the caucus. I hear directly from the supporters about more regular and two-way dialogue with the caucus. I meet with my supporters virtually during the course of this leadership campaign to hear their ideas, to hear their energy, to hear what's going on, what they're seeing on the ground, to share my perspectives in order to move forward.
So I think you understand very quickly here. Mark Carney is a walking, talking, beige wall-roomed focus group. The man has nothing but his buzzwords. His team told him to go out there and mention the economy a lot, but then sound detailed and thoughtful about it. So, and say, well, it's not just the economy. It's about jobs. It's about wages growing faster than inflation. It's about love and unity or whatever. We need to be hands-on, not hands-off. We need to have a two-way dialogue. I can feel them sending out a questionnaire, and two-way dialogue polled quite well as something that metropolitan liberals like to hear. Canadians themselves, do you think a working class guy is going to respond well to this? And mark my words, that is the big demographic group that's going to cause the liberals to not win. Let's be very clear. Doesn't matter what many of the pollsters are saying. I think they're just off. They're not faking it. I think they're just wrong. The Conservatives are going to win in 2025. And it's because the Liberals do not appeal to middle aged working class men. That is the demographic. They are losing to the Conservatives by a margin of like 30 points. The Conservatives, at that middle class, especially trade school like plumber type man, that, between the ages of 25 and 45, the Conservatives are winning it by like dictatorship numbers, like above 50%. Nothing Mark Carney said there was good at all. And I want to move on to Karina Gould, because that absolutely flabby response reminded me a lot of stuff that Karina Gould said. A lot of these people, here is just her answering a question. She's very much like Mark Carney. She positioned herself as more of like the core lefty of the leadership race. She backs UBI. She says we can't back off the carbon tax. We need more subsidies. We need the government to invest in the economy and whatnot. Socialism. But she would engage in the same inane rhetoric that Mark Carney did. So like her answers on Donald Trump were like, Donald Trump's a big, mean, scary man, and we gotta stand up strong because he won't respect us unless we stand up, and we do it strongly. I am parodying her answer, but that was what it was like. Had no examples of what she would do. She had nothing really to say about like what assets Canada has that can leverage against the United States. This is where Frank Bales did far better. When Frank Bales talked about a topic, you could tell he actually worked in business. I still wouldn't vote for any of these people. I'm a conservative. I don't like any of them. But if I'm an average voter, I feel like Frank Bales actually gave detail that wasn't consultanty detail. Consultant detail is just nice sounding words. Frank Bales would say something that might have even ticked off certain people, but you could see that another demographic of voters would probably really resonate to it. But here's Karina Gould talking, and you will quickly notice the just pablum.
And I pushed Mark on his economic ideas because this has to be a debate.
Oh, this is actually not from the debate. This is from the press conference afterwards. But we'll still listen to this. I think it still has to do with the debate.
Has to be a debate of ideas. The whole point of this Liberal leadership race is so that Liberals have a chance to see who we are as candidates, to make an informed decision about the vision that we are putting forward. And this is just a test run for the real debate that's going to come in the election. And Pierre Poilievre, Yves-François Blanchet, Jagmeet Singh, they're not going to be nearly as nice as I was. I had kid gloves on this morning or this evening. When it comes to the real debate, it was very clear to me that last night and tonight, I am the only one of the candidates who's ready to take on those opposition leaders tomorrow if needed.
That was the funny thing about the debate. People considered Karina Gould like the attack dog. She really didn't hit anyone that hard. She's right. She was using kid gloves, but it's not because she's she's so tough and she's really going to take it to Pierre Poilievre if she's the leader. No, she would get steamrolled too. She just happened to be taking slight jabs at other people, but it really wasn't much of anything. That was the funny thing. Karina Gould pretends like I was the one with ideas up there. Like her ideas are UBI and keeping the carbon tax. And that, I guess, was her big hit on Mark Carney, is that he didn't have ideas, which means that he had zero ideas. She had like 1.5 ideas. I want to grab up a clip of her talking specifically about Donald Trump. This is what I mean when I say that she sounds a lot like Mark Carney in the fact that she kind of just has vague ideas. Chrystia Freeland and all this, and I haven't talked about her yet because she was also extremely dull, and I can't even keep the four of them straight based on how terrible the debate was. But her thing was just patriotism, projecting. We need to be strong Canadians and stand up to the bully Donald Trump and Pierre Poilievre, who's taking pages out of Donald Trump's playbook, and Donald Trump, Canadian Maple Leafs, maple syrup. That was basically Chrystia Freeland. She had no detail, but at least she was being honest about the fact that she was just surface level Canadian patriotism projecting, and that was it.
Look, men like Donald Trump have always underestimated leaders like me, but they underestimate me, and that's their mistake. And I think as Canadians, we know what that's like. We know how to stand up for who we are and to stand up to bullies. And that's something that I've been doing in the House of Commons for the last decade. I know how to stand up to people like Pierre Poilievre, who, when it comes to Donald Trump, would rather imitate him than stand up for Canada. I know how to stand up to
What do you mean by imitate him? Because if any of these people actually named a policy that Poilievre and Donald Trump share, every Canadian would be like, well, it's probably because that just seems like common sense to do. That's the thing. None of these people can actually make a substantial attack on Donald Trump past the tariffs. Because if they were to start criticizing a lot of Trump's domestic policy, and I have my own criticisms of some of the things that Trump does. I'm not really a big fan of tariffs. I don't even think it's good for the American people for them to be tariffing people who aren't national security threats. Sometimes I disagree with them on certain foreign policy decisions, but for the most part, the Liberals can't really name anything because cutting wasteful spending is extremely popular in Canada these days. Cutting taxes is extremely popular. Going away from climate plans is very popular. You know, increasing law enforcement spending is very popular. Like putting back in place mandatory minimums is very popular. So Karina Gould is just basically saying, I don't like Donald Trump, and you guys probably don't like Donald Trump too. And Pierre Poilievre is vaguely like him because they use similar language about fake news sometimes, which is entirely warranted.
people who want to take from us what is rightfully ours. We are a proud, sovereign country. And as Canadians, we have so much to offer, but also the Americans depend on us. And you can't bring a calculator to a knife fight. You have to fight very strongly and with the right tools. And that's exactly what I'm going to do as Prime Minister.
We got to fight strongly and with the right tools. Thanks, lady. Thanks. I didn't realize that we had to fight strongly and with the right tools. I thought we had to sit down, fight weakly, and use all the wrong tools. Okay, here's Frank Bayless, and I think his answer on Trump was probably the best because he gives substance. Again, I don't even agree exactly with his plan, but has a specific plan, and it's a specific plan you can say yes or no to. And I think a lot of these other campaigns, they're thinking, well, I don't want to say anything concrete because someone could disagree with me. And this is not just a liberal thing. It's something that happens frequently, even in the federal conservatives. Even today, sometimes the federal conservatives are too meek in rolling something out. Like, just take a hard stance now. Even if people attack you now, take the stance now, fight for it, and then change people's minds. Having vague stances that nobody can really disagree with also means nobody's really going to run out of their house on election day to vote for it either. This is where I agree actually with the more conservative people in the BC Provincial Conservative Caucus, because they've been doing a really good job taking tough stances that gets the NDP really mad, that ticks off the legacy media. But if they stick it out and fight for it, they're going to get a big benefit from doing that sort of thing. And I'm specifically talking about MLAs like Dallas Brody, Brent Chapman, Heather Ma. A lot of these people have been doing really good work. Tara Armstrong taking a tough stance. The media criticizes you, but if you win in the long run, you triple your winnings almost. Like if you don't risk anything, you win nothing. But here is Frank Bayless talking about Donald Trump.
So I've negotiated hundreds and hundreds of contracts with Americans over my 40-year career. And from time to time, I run into the character of Mr. Trump, so it's not new to me. On this point, I published a letter one day before his inauguration when I said clearly, he's not going to put 25% tariffs on everything, but he's going to...
By the way, I actually do give Frank Bayless a lot of credit for that, and I gave him credit when he was the first guy to announce his leadership run. Like, he was the only person in this entire race who was not dumb enough to think that they were actually going to put 25% tariffs on us. I even was predicting, and even I started wavering on my own prediction, that they'll find an excuse by the end not to do it, because, dude, that would hurt Trump in the Midwest really hard, where they rely on a lot of Canadian imports.
Attack certain industries. The first one I said he's going to attack is steel. It's exactly what he did. I tell you this to tell you that I know how to deal with him. And it's important to understand that Mr. Trump is a bully. And you do not give 1 inch to a bully. In that case, we cannot be learning this on the job. That's where I come in. I have the experience and the expertise to deal with Donald Trump. I can predict what he'll do, and then I can help build our defenses to stop him from doing those things, and also counterattack, which unfortunately is going to be necessary. This way, I will protect our country, I will protect our economy, I will protect our culture, and I will protect our sovereignty.
Yeah, so it's still very much just boilerplate rhetoric. But I found like he actually moved on and said, I wouldn't meet with Trump. I would maybe send some people down to meet for him on my behalf, but I'm not going to subject myself to one of these embarrassing moments where he makes me sit outside his office for 2 hours. I'll put my counter tariffs in place and then I'll sit and wait for him to negotiate with me. Again, not a stupid idea, not a dumb idea. I think that if we just tighten up on border security and we start spending more on the military, Trump's not going to have a reason to tariff us. And if he did anyways, he would then look like an idiot because we did what he wanted and it still wasn't good enough, and his voters would then turn on him. I'm saying this as somebody who actually doesn't mind Trump at all, but from the perspective as Canadians, obviously we can't say, well, I like Trump from a US context, so he should do whatever he wants. We still have to look out for this country first, and that's where Pierre Poilievre's plan has been the best, of lowering taxes, making us hyper competitive so that it doesn't matter if they tariff us or not. We could actually suck jobs from their economy into our economy because it's easier to do business here. That's why I hate the stupid Canada, Team Canada approach that Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau have been pushing forward. By the way, if you live in Ontario, please tomorrow go and vote for the New Blue Party of Ontario. It doesn't matter if they get a seat or not. Everyone's like, well, they can't win a seat. Doug Ford is just fat Trudeau at this point. My friend Daniel Boardman put out a great chart showing that right now in Ontario, your options are fat Trudeau, female Trudeau, other female Trudeau, and green Trudeau. So if you vote New Blue, at least you're indicating, hey, can somebody be conservative in this province? And then if none of them do that, then the next time, the next election, the next real election, because this is like a province-wide by-election right now in Ontario, there might be enough momentum to have New Blue get 3 or 4 seats. Anyway, so let's move on to some of the stuff that Chrystia Freeland said, and then I want to jump over to some of the hits on Mark Carney that came from the Conservatives, because he's just not smooth on his feet at all. He's not just boring. He constantly causes himself a lot of injuries by being very inaccurate with how he speaks. So we have Chrystia Freeland basically saying that, and this is the most on-brand thing she said the entire night, of thinking that we need to partner with people who have nuclear weapons to protect our Arctic, also implying that we have to defend ourselves militarily from the Americans.
The U.S. is turning predator. And so what Canada needs to do is work closely with our democratic allies, our military allies. I've been foreign minister. I know how to do that. That's why I would start with our Nordic partners, specifically Denmark, which is also being threatened, and our European NATO allies. I would be sure that France and Britain were there, who possess nuclear weapons. And I would be working urgently with those partners to build a closer security relationship that guarantees our security in a time when the United States can be a threat.
Yeah, and she'll really finish off there saying can be a threat. Like, whoa, lady, are you planning on fighting the United States? And that's that. And again, that was her entire performance, is that the United States is very bad. Donald Trump is very bad. Pierre Poilievre is like Donald Trump, and we need to fight. And, maple leaves and maple syrup or whatever. That was her entire thing. She was probably the candidate on stage with the least amount of specifics. The candidate with the most specifics was probably Frank Baylis, followed behind by Karina Gould and then Mark Carney. But Mark Carney was probably closer to Chrystia Freeland on the scale of being extremely limited in his details. He would give fake details, like, we need to build an economy, and that economy needs to be made up of workers who have 2 hands and 10 fingers and 10 toes. And we also need AI. We need intelligence. We need industry. And he would just kind of keep like saying stuff that didn't mean anything, where at least Frank Baylis would specifically talk about like specific investments he wants to make, or targeted tax cuts, or that he actually was the one who said we need to force through a pipeline east and west. And that's at least somewhat unique for a Montrealer to say, that he would force Quebec to build a pipeline. So neat. So if I'm giving out letter grades, I'll keep talking about the debate after the letter grades. If I'm giving out letter grades, I give Carney a C. He is there. He gets a C for Carney. He is barely there. I don't notice him. He does himself no favors. The more you watch him, the less you understand why there's hype online for him. I never understood it in the first place, to be fair. So he gets a C. Chrystia Freeland honestly, I'd give her like, and I'm talking purely from a liberal member's context, who helped themselves in this leadership race, even if they don't have a chance of winning. I would give Chrystia Freeland a B minus. She wasn't specific at all, and that would rub a lot of people the wrong way. But for frankly Eastern Canadian, um, like metropolitan boomers, certain ones of them will really like the laid on thick anti-American and anti-Poilievre rhetoric. So that probably bumped her up a little bit. I do think probably Carney lost ground in this debate, not because, again, he failed. It's just because he was so boring that everyone is rising past him and stealing votes just from him being, frankly, extremely dull. Maybe I have to give Mark Carney a C minus then. He didn't embarrass himself exactly. He just was barely there. Karina Gould probably gets an A minus. She was, again, more specific. She kind of mapped herself out the more left-wing vote of the party, the orange liberals that actually Justin Trudeau used in order to win the party leadership, and then we used to win the 2015 election. Justin Trudeau is actually a very left progressive liberal. He is very different from Paul Martin or John Chrétien. He is a social progressive first and an economic progressive second. So that's why all of his economic policy was so bad. Not only was it very left, but it was left with a very strong focus first on social issues before actual economic outcomes. And that's what Karina Gould's doing with her, championing of the carbon tax and with her championing of universal basic income and more green investments in boondoggles. She is the pure continuation of Justin Trudeau. Obviously, Mark Carney is the guy who has Team Trudeau behind him, but in terms of who is trying to do the closest Trudeau impression is Gould, and then followed by Carney simply through the fact that he is literally explicitly stating that he will mostly continue Trudeau era policies, minus, we need to focus more on the economy. We need to laser focus on the economy, which means nothing. But yeah, he wants to keep universal dental and all these other things going, but he's going to cut taxes. He's not. All these people only also talk about cutting middle class taxes. It's very easy to cut middle class taxes because, as a middle class person myself, we don't pay that much taxes. So if you reduce middle class people's taxes by a bit, a lot of people like you. At the same time, you didn't hurt your revenues too much. Our revenues should be hurt on the federal level at this point because we spend way too much money. The federal budget should probably contract by a full 25% at this point. But I think it was only Frank Bayless who actually talked about cutting like corporate taxes, which is smart. Good on him. They should cut corporate taxes. You should cut people who make more and business taxes because those people actually pay the most, and everyone has to buy goods from them and services. So if you cut at corporate taxes, that is actually a bigger tax cut for middle class people than directly cutting middle class taxes by even 1 or 2%. Anyways, so Karina Gould, A minus. I would give Frank Bayless an A plus because he's only at like 3% in this leadership race right now. I guarantee he might finish like 8% or even 12% because he's been a big figure in these debates. When you actually look at the polling in terms of Google Trends, who were people looking up during the debate, he was doing quite well. I know some people will say, well, that's just because not a lot of people even knew him in the first place. But the problem is, I remember Scott Aitchison running in the 2022 federal conservative election. You guys probably don't remember him. I barely remember him. He's the housing critic right now for the conservatives, but he never really spiked in the leadership debates because he kind of put forward a very standard red Tory performance that didn't make anyone interested in looking him up. Bayless did. This was the search results during the actual debate. He was 41% of the searches. Chrystia Freeland was only 9 because a lot of people already knew who she is, and nothing that she was saying really prompted further investigation. She hates Americans. She's a boilerplate liberal. She's going to tell you that she's been finance minister for a while, and that's why she deserves something or whatever. Carney got 23%, and Karina Gould, as the other kind of breakout star of the debate, got 27%. But Bayless decisively became the attention getter of the campaign and could turn himself into the real kingmaker if Freeland and Carney end up getting into that high 30 or lower 40% range, he could throw them all of his second place votes, and one of them could get across the finish line. I, again, hope they all lose because I don't like the Liberals at all, but I am attempting to be neutral. Anyways, before I move on to the big flub of the night of Mark Carney, I want to talk about before I talk about Carney, I want to talk about Carney's flops, and then I want to talk about the reaction that a lot of Liberal cheerleaders online had to this debate, because I think that it was telling how Liberals were trying to spin this debate as a good thing. I thought this debate made them look bad. Even if certain candidates made themselves look good by comparison to others, the debate overall demonstrated that nobody has any new ideas in the Liberal Party, and nobody really is going to be a big departure from Trudeau. In the question that they were asked about, how are you going to be different from Trudeau? Basically, all of them would just say, I'm going to listen to people more and focus on the economy. That was it. Here is a clip, actually, that Conservative MP for Toronto St. Paul, Don Stewart, posted to social media, saying it was an own goal for Mark Carney. And no doubt, alongside all the other radical statements that Carney has said in the past, stuff like this could be easily turned into an anti-Mark Carney advertisement.
I want to be clear, and Canadians feel this. I want to be clear about the, quote, strength of our economy. Mm-hmm. Our economy over the last 5 years has been driven by a big increase in the labor force, which was largely because of a surge in immigration that is now trying to be controlled, and by government spending that grew over 9% year after year after year, twice the rate of growth of our economy. Okay, so our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats from President Trump.
I don't need to play the rest of that for you. That is, Don Stewart said in his post that this was the biggest own goal of the night, and that is absolutely correct. Mark Carney is trying to sound statesmanly. I could admit to some mistakes that the government has made, but he doesn't mention the fact that he was the guy who was advising Trudeau on economic policy for the last 5 years. And there's no indication that Mark Carney was not being listened to. If anything, and this has been leaked by Freeland's staff in Parliament, that she was basically being forced to implement every stupid idea that Mark Carney had. Now, let's be clear that Chrystia Freeland didn't have better ideas than Mark Carney, probably, but every bad consequence over the last 5 years that Canadians have had to suffer through is because of Mr. Mark Carney. He's just economically incompetent. People point to him and say, well, he did well under Harper and Flaherty. Yeah, because Harper and Flaherty were telling him what to do. In 2008, do you think Mark Carney was calling his own shots? Not a chance. It was earlier in his career, and he is previously starting to leave his more economically, slightly more conservative roots when he was working for Paul Martin as deputy finance minister and actually engaging in some fiscal, restraint. But that was when he was under other people's leadership and they were telling him what to do. Once he left as the governor of the Bank of Canada and he became the governor of the Bank of England, and he's been working for his own companies and engaging with the World Economic Forum and the UN, he has gone extremely Keynesian. I was talking to a conservative organizer the other night who's reading Carney's book, and he says that he does name check Karl Marx in his book. This is why I call Mark Carney Marx Carney, because when you look at the guy's policies, he is left. I'm very unclear if he even disagrees with Karina Gould on anything, or if he is just less willing to say what she's willing to say out loud, but he would totally do it if he got in. And I think that's probably true. But I'm just talking about in this debate how they're presenting themselves. But yeah, that is going to be an easy advertisement for the Conservatives in this next election. Here is another clip that Melissa Lantsman had posted. It's just 9 seconds. Melissa Lantsman is the Conservative MP for Thornhill. And this is Mark Carney. Not what he probably directly means, but this guy's a flub machine on the debate stage, kind of accidentally talking down Canadians by being deeply inaccurate with his language.
Mark Carney.
Okay, one of the reasons why families have a hard time to afford their groceries is because we haven't had productivity. That's the issue.
And everyone's trying to say, well, that's not what he means. He means the economy overall has not been productive. The problem is is that the blame is not on the Canadian economy, it's on the Canadian government. And yeah, he kind of gave that lip service in the previous clip that government spending has been outpacing the growth of the economy, and most of our growth is only coming from labor. But at the same time, he talks about this as if he's now the man with the secret sauce to tell us how we can be more productive. He's the one who's going to pass the right policies to make it all better. And he's just not. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing, proven by the last 5 years. And I don't think that Canadians want this kind of elitist technocrat as their prime minister, a man who thinks he fundamentally knows how to do your job better than you can, even though he's never actually run a small business or he's never started a business. He's simply been on boards and been an advisor on companies that were probably going to succeed whether he was there or not. Anyways, so the last thing I want to cover here today was the weird kind of response that this debate got from liberals online. Here's Carol McNeil, who is a former CBC broadcaster, and she actually ran this post as an advertisement on X. She said, "I'm quite enjoying the liberal debate. Everyone comes across as serious-minded and thinking about how to make this country better. They're not at each other's throats. I like it." Who cares? Who actually cares that they're not at each other's throats? If anything, they should have been. Because a lot of those people on stage, 3 out of 4 of them, minus Bayless, although Bayless is also corrupt, he was involved in all the ventilator scams during COVID, that all these people should have been going after each other for having bad records in the government, and the fact that they won't proves that they're not serious about fixing the problems. Here's another one from another liberal account online, and these have gotten substantial likes from liberals themselves. Kimbo here says, "Well, great debate. I thank Chrystia Freeland for constantly reminding us about how wrong Pierre is for the role of Prime Minister. Everyone was aware Carney would give it his all in the French debate. He did well." No, he didn't. This actually was for the French debate, though, but same difference. Both debates were horrifyingly awful and dull. "Nothing said changed my mind. I still believe Mark Carney is the best choice. 2025 Canada." I don't know why this has such weird spacing, but what did Carney actually do in any of these debates that made you feel confident at all? He's just an AI. Mark Carney, when he talks, makes me feel like he's a background character in a film, and they just needed him to have some sort of technical sounding dialogue, but they didn't want to try too hard on it. Here is Dr. Matthew S. Johnson, everyone's favorite actual paid liberal shill. He says, "Justin Trudeau has been sprinted into the finish. As a Canadian, I appreciate that." That has nothing to do with the debate, but I just found that hilariously out of touch. But he says here about the debate last night, "I like Karina's emphasis on affordability by improving the social safety net, but improving the economy through less drastic measures isn't such a terrible idea either. As she criticized Mark Carney and Chrystia for, and she would need to account for that as PM in a Trump era." Okay, well, I like how he's both saying, I like her ideas, but I also like other ideas too, because this man is paid to not have any ideas past the fact that liberals good and whoever wins is good. Here is him trying to hype up all this, policy talk, this substantial policy talk that was going on. "Not just push money out the door," like quote, that was a quote from Carney. Quote from Carney on defense spending not just being about arbitrary targets. Freeland responds that reaching 2027 target is a matter of will. Carney tighter approach to fiscal management, I think, is what appeals to a lot of Canadians post-Trudeau. And then he says, "This is an intelligent debate." No, it is not. None of these people, other than Frank Bayless, actually gave detail. And even then, Frank Bayless, you could say, was wrong on his actual prescriptions for what the economy needs. There are so many liberals posting about how it was so great it was unified. It's not actually great. It proves that they haven't learned a thing since Justin Trudeau announced that he'd be stepping down. All of them show that they are a marginally different person than Justin Trudeau. And the Canadian economy is in fact broken. They can say that that's unpatriotic to say, it's a fact. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that fact and actually give a full fat reform policy, then you're not useful to anybody in Canada. But anyways, so that should be it. To recap, I'd probably give Frank Bayless for the fact that he actually got a lot of attention these last two debates A+. Karina Gould probably mapped out the most distinct portion of the Liberals to vote for her, the core left. She gets an A-. I think that Chrystia Freeland, from the perspective of the very strong anti-American vote in the leadership race, probably gets an A-. And Carney was barely there, so he gets a C-. That was this Liberal leadership debate. Like, share, and subscribe for this video because that was painful to watch. And I'll see you guys all next time.